Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. We are so excited to be joined again here by Michelle Dickey, who, again, we spoke quite a few weeks ago. Excited to have her back as a coach, a trauma specialist, a consultant, an author as well, and, of course, the founder of her own company. It's consulting for heightened awareness, and she's based out of North Carolina, but making strides and helping people all over the world. Michelle, would you mind introducing yourself to our listeners to start? Thank you.
Yes, sure, Jill. No problem. Yes, Consulting for Heightened Awareness, for those who are new, is just a non-denominational spiritual ministry that specializes in narcissistic abuse and trauma recovery with God's wisdom. That's it in its simplicity. There's a lot that goes into it, obviously, but we help survivors overcome the trauma that is associated with the abuse, because many of us realize that that's exactly what all that abuse was. The abuser dishing out all that abuse. And that's to keep them, the target traumatized.
Yeah.
And so, yes, very much. And not only that, but trauma bonded to the abuser, and then in turn the abuse. So we have to, part of the process, a process is undoing all of that, breaking the trauma bond and overcoming that, and just realizing that who they thought that abuser was in the beginning is just not who they are, because their true colors show. Oftentimes, I've said this before, but oftentimes when the survivor, or the target, starts to make positive changes in their life, like say they start working out, or they change their diet for the better, making improvements, right? So the abuser can't stand to see that. So a lot of time, that's when we start to see their true colors come through, because they'll start dishing out gaslights like, why are you doing that? Why are you changing that? Yeah, it just sounds like you're familiar with that one as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I am. I think I don't know anyone who hasn't been in any type of abusive relationship. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. God bless those who haven't. I've also grew up in a household where I had abusive parents, so I'm more prone to knowing what to expect. And at the same time, I think also tricked into getting into one of those relationships as well. And I know you can empathize and relate with me on that, but yeah, it's very prevalent, and it's great that you're here with your company, with your all the awareness and all you do to help people. So thank you, Michelle. Um, and as an author, do you have your workbook as well? I remember. Do you have that with you
Uh,
today?
oh, I do. I have the Real Events of Narcissistic Abuse. This is a really great survival guide, okay, for people, because it's not going to re-traumatize anybody. All right, we were very careful. I just go through my own story, and it is also the reader's opportunity to take a walk with me on my journey into what I call God's reality, post narcissistic abuse, when he opened our eyes to what was really happening in front
Yeah,
of us.
yeah,
And it's like, wow, because we didn't know all of that was there, because
yeah,
during that trauma bonding process to the abuser, we were getting induced with that heavy confusion, which,
yeah.
the fancy term for that is cognitive dissonance.
True, true.
So, yeah. And so that's why we compiled a playlist over on the YouTube channel for those who are wondering how to know when you're fully healed. Because like in my story, I also, hey, guilty, didn't give myself enough time and space to do the healing, to make sure we were fully healed. So I found myself in one after the other. And then, of course, some toxic workplaces, obviously, too. And so I share those stories for the red flag for people to become more familiar with, or if they, because there's a lot of stuff in there. And then, especially with situation number 9, that was the straw that
Yeah,
broke the camel's back.
yeah,
And it was, had no idea, because I was not romantically involved. So what I did is I turned him into a case study, because I
yeah.
was like, okay, I want to learn. So I'm gonna watch what is going on, because I mean, it's just from, I think it took about 4 years of being his roommate
Uh,
that, uh-huh, for me to finally see what was going on. And I was like, okay. And then, of course, I was in my master's program at the time as well. So I was, I had already learned about the psychopath checklist, things like that. So he
Oh,
was,
wow.
he was, yeah, fit that checklist to a T. So I was like, okay, but there's more going on in the spiritual than just that. I was like, there's more to this because I said, this can't be just, it's not that cut and dry. There's something else going on. And so that's when I just kept watching and paying attention and letting things be revealed. It's like I talk about a lot
Yep.
elsewhere that's just God revealing all these little things that we missed. Because one of the things we all come to realize is that we noticed that the behaviors were a little odd, but at the time we didn't know it was a red flag. Now we're learning this and we're getting, so I'm bringing that to everybody's awareness as well because there's different flavors of
Yeah.
these abusers. And so the way that they dish out the abuse, once you know the pattern, you know what I'm saying? Like once you know the foundation, then you can pretty much put two and two together with using logic.
Yeah.
With the backhanded compliment, the gaslight, things like that. There's different ways that they'll do it. And it's like, okay, so we have to, learn all of that. And then also, you know, do the inner work. I talk a lot about that daily self check-in that we have to do during the healing process and even beyond, because we need to make sure we're checking on ourselves. But that's all we
Yeah.
can do. We check on ourselves. And that's part of that inner work, checking in with oneself. Well, also checking in with God to see
Yeah.
where we're at, you know,
Wow.
to maintain that regulation, because that's really a big part. That's like step number one is so crucial is
Yeah.
to get that right. Because during all that abuse and walking on eggshells and things like that,
Hmm.
yeah, we were emotionally dysregulated,
Yeah.
never knowing, which version of the abuser we were going to get. And so it's like, okay, so we have to learn how to, okay, know where we are at
Yeah.
and maintain that. 'Cause that's our peace. That's that
Hmm.
inner peace. And we learn to protect that. So one of the big
Absolutely.
things, yeah, yeah, one of the big things in knowing when we're fully healed is that when none of that, the abuse, or any of it, anything external, the triggers and things like that, that's the thing we realize too. All the trauma
Yep.
triggers are external. So once we get a handle on that, we realize that that's not coming from within us. And
Hmm.
so, right, maintaining that and being able to maintain that calm and that regulation wherever we go. That's a huge sign that you're fully healed right there. It's like mastery. You mastered yourself, basically being able to control yourself by not reacting anymore, seeing what they're doing. Okay. And then we don't associate with it. And then we also learn how to control and manage our own empathy. See, that's the
Yeah.
thing right there. Because we didn't realize that we were walking around with a heart on our sleeves. We didn't realize that.
Hmm.
So it's like, okay. So once we're out of that, we get on the healing journey and things like that, we start to learn this. And I also teach about that spiritual energy transfer
Yep.
because that's exactly what that is. All that
Hmm.
negative abuse that's being dished out, they're trying to dump their negative emotional baggage onto the target
Yep.
and tricking their target into internalizing their negative emotion.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. And so we realized that we were not put here to do that.
Yeah.
We were never meant to do that, to
Yeah.
to carry their negative baggage. No, they're the one, like all of us, they're the ones that have to work out that salvation with the Heavenly Father themselves.
Hmm.
Because if they choose to, because that can be overcome. But the other thing we realize as well is that it's very generational,
Hmm.
all that abuse. And so a lot of us, as we do that inner work, part of that self-reflecting
Yeah.
and how God brings things back to our remembrance so that we can connect those dots. So
Yeah.
going forward,
Hmm.
we don't get duped into another one over and over and over again because a lot of us have. We had to
Yeah.
learn the lesson. And so once we learn those lessons, we're like, Okay, and so we can recognize when a abuser is trying to do the trauma bonding.
Yeah.
And so once we recognize that, that's where the course comes from, like how the trauma bonders form with CHA Academy, because I break it down with God's wisdom and then also basic scientific facts. Once we
Yeah.
have a better handle on what's going on, inside the brain, the body, chemistry, and all of that, because of the, that dopamine, the norepinephrine,
Yeah.
that's where that dysregulation comes from.
Mm-hmm.
It's the constant push pull and alteration in the brain chemistry, because
Yeah.
we're confused. Actions aren't matching words. We don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that came from when I came across that question. And oh, for anyone who doesn't know, this ministry and the work started over on Quora quite a while ago. That little Q&A site.
Wow.
That, yeah, it's referred to as the nerdy kid in the back of the room with the book kind of site. But it's where a lot of survivors end up. And so that's why I've got two spaces over there. And then I still answer questions every now and again on there. There's tons of content over there already from the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have, the devil and narcissism. And then I also have a cognitive dissonance battling that. Okay. Because that's part of the spiritual battle. We're
Yeah.
dealing with cognitive dissonance, aka that confusion, and then narcissism and the abuse associated with it. That's what we're dealing with. And it was like, okay, I have to learn how to navigate,
Yeah.
you know, through all of that, and then realize that it's not about us.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that these abusers trick their targets into thinking also, is
Yeah.
that all that abuse that they dish out, they want us to think that we did something wrong when we didn't. They want us to, again, internalize their stuff, but they want to try and trick their targets into thinking that there's something wrong with their target. And there's nothing wrong with the target.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what the abuser wants the target to think. And so it's part of the fact that they also look at it's really crazy, but they look at humans as objects. I mean, it's like, once we realize that, we're like, oh, no
Yeah.
wonder. Yep, they do. They look at humans as objects. They're not able to relate on an intimate level. They don't know how to have that kind of human connection. And many of us, once we're back in God's word, we realize why, because they're spiritually dead. Got to have that empathy and compassion in order to be able to have a healthy human connection, not an attachment,
Yeah.
but healthy connection. So
Yeah.
we learn this as well. Yeah, exactly. So that whole part of the trauma bonding process, that
Yeah.
really is just us developing an unhealthy attachment to people and things. And so the abuser does that also because the abuser wants us dependent on them only.
Yeah.
And, yeah. And that way, that's why they do the isolation. That's why they pull all of those stunts to try and keep their targets away from any kind of support network. So that's why a lot of survivors, when they come out of the narcissistic abuse situation, it's like, where do I go? Who do I talk to? That kind of thing. And so that's a normal part of the process because you've got a little bit of that fear of the unknown. Then later on in the healing process, we learn how to embrace that. We don't have to fear the unknown because we realize that guess what? We've been protected this whole time anyway, and God got us out of that. He's going to continue to protect us because he's in us,
Yeah.
with us wherever we go. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, when we realize that, because a lot of us ask ourselves, how in the world did we make it out of that? But now we know why. And so I'll never forget, brief story time also with that situation number 9. I'll never forget some of the stunt that he was trying to pull, and he would shoot me that sideways evil stare. And yeah, like trying to figure out how I was still standing with all the things that he was rigging up around the house, trying to take me down. And I was like, you know what? But I caught on to it because God guided my steps. I mean, I found the
Yeah.
baby monitors. Yeah,
You're
hey,
smart. Yeah.
Yep. I was listening and then I did the research as well.
Hmm.
Because I knew, you know, with two hearing aids, I knew something was off in that house. And I was like, something up. Yeah, so I did the research. I took a crash course in physics 101. All of that. That's what happens a lot of times. We want to know what is going on so that we can combat it and get through it, to get through that storm. And so as you was revealing all these little devices that I would find in places and things like that, I was able to connect the dots. I knew what he was doing. And so I was like, aha. So I'll be on the front porch as I'm packing to leave now. And he would shoot me those sideways glances, almost as if to ask me, how in the world am I still standing? Well, the answer's simple. His name is
Wow.
God.
Hmm.
That's it. And so, I mean, going through that crazy making,
God
that's
bless.
why, yeah. And I was like, okay, because we realized something that when we make the decision to leave, some of them that are at that kind of psychopathic level, that some of them will, I mean, they will stoop to
Yeah.
some low stuff
Hmm.
in an attempt to try and keep us there.
Yeah.
One of the common tactics is that they offer to go to therapy.
Hmm.
And it's like I spoke about in a previous episode about how we learn not to fall for that because we were thinking, hold on a second, that would be somebody that they went and already talked to, making us out
Wow.
to be making us
Wow.
out to be the crazy one ahead of time, and
Hmm.
it's one that they paid for.
Wow.
So we were like, we don't take that bait because the ex psycho tried that, and I just looked at him. I was like,
Hmm.
nope, walk away.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because you were trying to get me to stay. I was like, no, because case closed. I got all the notes I need. And so I was like, okay. And so that's why I brought that out and I wanted to put it in that book for everyone else to learn from as well. And then also so they know they're not alone.
Yeah.
That's a huge help in the healing process is just to know that they're not alone, that this is going on every day out there. And that's why I said to myself, I mean, I remember God told me, He said, yeah, but He's going to wake people up every single day. He's going to wake survivors up every day. He does, just like He did us. And so we realized, okay, so we have several of us out here in position to help so that they know that they don't have to go through this alone. I mean, with the Godhead, we're never alone spiritually, no. But He knows the need for a human connection, somebody that isn't going to look at them like they have three heads when they share their story. So that's pretty much what a lot of us, we get it. We know how crazy the abusers can get. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't surprise us, when they share their stories and things like that with us, because we know that they're telling the truth
Yeah.
of what
Yeah.
happened to them. Yeah. And it's a lot of it's still mind blowing, and it's unfortunate, but we learn that, okay, you know what? All of that was a lesson as well. As bizarre and horrific as it is, we're here to also let people know that 100% healing is possible. It
Yeah.
really is. There's some people out there spreading the narrative that you never fully overcome your trauma. And I was like, oh, I got to step in and do an intervention. We do those too,
Uh-huh.
because there's many of us that can attest to the fact that healing is 100% possible.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us out here that we went through the process. That's the thing. So I say that's the trick of the enemy, trying to get people to, fall off of the healing path because after all, the enemy doesn't want people to heal, but
Yeah.
God does.
Yeah.
He wants to keep people traumatized
Yeah.
so that they don't. And so he's trying to convince some people that you know, you don't fully recover from trauma. Yes, you can. It's all part of that. Like I said, the first step. It's all part. It starts with that, being able to get yourself regulated and stay that way, no matter what. Because once you master that, boy, I tell you, and it gets easier. It does take practice,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, we learned that none of this is overnight. So we let ourselves have that time and the space and to really, really work on staying single for however long we have to,
Yeah.
to get fully healed, because a lot of us learn the hard way that we still have vulnerable tattooed on our forehead
Yeah.
because we got tricked into thinking we were fully healed, got
Hmm.
into another one. And
Yeah.
yeah, so we had to learn all of those things. And so that's why once we do that, we you know, stay committed to the healing process, because that way you will get there, and not get sucked into another abusive relationship or situation for that matter. Because all about just that, yeah, that education and that heightened awareness. That's where that comes from. It's
Yeah.
having that heightened awareness, of paying attention, not giving attention to the abuser, but paying attention
Yeah.
to what they're dishing out. And then, okay, as like, I know a lot of people have said, well, we don't put a whole lot of stock into what they say. However,
Mm-hmm.
there does come a time where we learn that they tell on themselves when we're paying attention as well. So we want to catch that. So a big way that they do it, for many of us, heard some variation of this or another at the very beginning. Well, if you really knew who I was,
Yeah.
they're here. So we don't ignore that red flag anymore. We're like, okay. And also, many of them will sit there because also in this book, okay, I have a couple of instances where the guy that I was dating, it wasn't him that was the abuser, it was someone else. So we gotta always remember that, because the narcissistic abusers are the ones who will also come out and accuse all, and I mean all their exes of being
Yeah.
crazy.
Yep.
And we're like, that's not true either, because even those of us that have gone through, a couple of decent relationships, we realized that, like, in one particular case, it was a jealous female roommate of the guy that I was dating. And then another one, it was his mother that drove the
Oh
wedge.
gosh.
So there you go. It's just, it wasn't them. They were very sweet guys. They never abused me, at all. It was somebody else close to them. And so we realized this. So that if, you know, the narcissistic abuser tells us that every single one of I remember thinking this, that if they had come to me and say all of their exes are crazy, I'm just going to say, nice to meet you. Have a nice day and walk away.
Yeah.
Because that's clear indicator that you're dealing with, okay, because that's not true. Not every ex, okay, was an abuser. And so we do learn this. Now, many of us, yes, we had that as well. But we got to look at the silver lining also in a lot of this stuff too, because we don't want to bear false witness.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go and accuse the couple of guys I dated that I know were not the abusers. I'm certainly not gonna accuse them when I know darn well it wasn't them. It was somebody else close to them who was. Because the mother is the one who, because I was laying out in the sun, and back in the day, I was preparing for some modeling gigs and things like that, and so she just blurted it out and told him, said, "Well, I don't know why you want to move to the other state with somebody who's just going to leave you when you get there."
Yeah.
What?
Huh.
I mean, because we were actually engaged. So I was like, okay. And I remember having to tell him that I hope you find someone your mother approves of someday. Because it was that. I was like, well, and she pulled a stunt and said that prevented him from being able to actually go with me at the time that we had made plans to do that.
Yeah.
And so 6 months went by and I realized I gotta let it go.
Yeah.
Gotta let it go. And pray for him, and that he finds somebody that she'll approve of. I mean, it's like, it is what it is, you
Yeah.
know. Uh, so that's that on that one. you have any
Wow.
question?
No, I just love your open, your honesty, and your willing. There's people out there listening who can benefit from your services because, unfortunately, or shall I say, fortunately, you've been through this. You're not just someone talking about the abuse, which is not bad. People can counsel and can coach, but the fact you've been in it, you can really directly relate to them and hopefully help so many people out by hopefully someone listening today. And unfortunately, we only have the 2 minutes left in the show. We're out of time. I don't know how that happens. Wow. So, oh my gosh. In the last 2 minutes, what else did you want to add?
I'll just let everybody know where they can reach me, and that is at 704-245-4340 or via email at michelle.dickey@cdhrwdrmd.org. And they can check out all the social that Ministry and Work is trending on the My Social page of the website.
Beautiful.
Sending love and light to all fellow warriors. Thank you for watching, listening, and for your support. Till next time, let's show some gratitude to the Heavenly Father, and you keep being you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Michelle. Pleasure having you here as always. And if we don't get to connect again, I know you'll connect with Ross, who I love dearly. I've been friends with him for about 15, 20 years. So, but you bring a lot of great light to the show and a lot to our listeners. And I got to thank you for that. Okay. I know it wasn't easy what you went through, but you're doing so much to help people. So thank you again. Have a great day, Michelle. Really pleasure. Bye-bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.